I'm Dr. Brendan O'Neill, and I'm a lecturer in University College Dublin and the co-director for the Centre for Experimental Archaeology and Material Culture at UCD. The objects that inspire me aren't the kind of usual ones I think that a lot of archaeologists come to. Normally it would be the finished objects, the brooches themselves, but I'm interested in the evidence that we have before the brooch is made. So these are things like crucibles, little cups to melt metal in. I'm interested in the moulds, that's the things that you pour metal into, and then the kind of furnaces that they use, the way that they kind of heated up everything that needed to be heated up. Well, my favourite object on display in the National Museum has to be the Dooey brooch mould. It's an object that really hides the detail that we're talking about here. On the surface, it's a piece of clay with an impression of a brooch in it. It's been used, it's a bit abraded, it's not the fanciest thing that we're ever going to see. But actually, when we understand it in its context, we understand the detail that's around it, it is a hugely impressive object that was used. It was used to produce something that was so desirable in this culture. If you go down to the Dooey brooch mould, you'll see they're actually pouring into these terminal ends, and the connections are about 2.5 millimeters either side, and they're getting the molten metal in there. You also have gas inside the mould, and you have to have a gas-liquid transition. So the gas has to come out as the liquid goes in. All that has to be done in 8 to 12 seconds. It's very tricky. Well, experimental archaeology is a kind of a research tool that we use. It's one part of archaeology. It's a way for us to test theories that we have about things through this idea of making and use. The knowledge and skills that people have in this period, say to do with metalworking, but other crafts as well, really comes to light when we move away from the finished object and look at these other indicators for production. So what we do is we take an object like the Dooey brooch mould, and we say we're going to make that brooch. To make the brooch, we have to understand the sequence. What we need first are the metals to do this. So this is copper and tin. Once you have the metals, then you need to make a crucible. It's a little cup to melt the metal. We need a mould to pour the metal into once it's melted. This has a little negative impression of the shape of the object that we want to make in it. And we need to make that impression. The better we make that impression, the better we make our mould, the better the object is going to be. So a mould is actually one of the most important parts of the production sequence. And then after that, obviously, we need a way of generating heat. This is in a furnace. Then it's really about understanding how heats are moving within this thing. And this is one of the knowledges that we're kind of interested in, people have. I can also take a stick that's been freshly cut, it's got sap in it, and place it into the molten metal. And what happens is it releases the moisture as a gas, and that gas makes bubbles. I can feel them bubbles up the stick, and they tell me how liquid the melt is. Very thick, very thin. But we have to understand all of that to bring this whole sequence together, just to pour metal into a mold. And then after that, when we're done, the object still needs to be finished. And that's something that we really don't have great evidence for. This type of method of reproducing something really highlights the areas that we know well and brings to light the things that we're less certain about. And that wouldn't have been something that I'd pick out early on in my research that we'd still be stumped on. Yeah, this is one of the replicas that we've made of the Dooey brooch, which I talk so much about Dooey that sometimes I forget the Dooey brooch doesn't actually exist. It's the Dooey brooch mould that inspires this object here. And you can see it's a very small brooch. Something as well that we don't really get from the Dooey brooch, a mould itself, is that it also would have had a pin, which is a separate process of production, which itself has a huge amount of work and knowledge in just creating that loop end to fold back over. To do that without breaking the bronze is really intricate in detail and requires a lot of skill. When I'm talking to people and using replica artifacts as part of that process, the second I bring objects into it, the physicality, the materiality, the sound, the touch, there's some objects that people just connect with in a very kind of immediate way. I think if we look at some of the wonderful things on display in the National Museum downstairs, what we see are objects that are amazing, but we feel detached from them because, well, we couldn't do that, right? And the truth is that we can. And that's actually a different perspective, telling people how to do it, giving them the agency that even in principle, they don't have to do it, but in principle, they could do it. That's a spark inside of people that really, really brings them and connects them to people in the past. That's what I think is the exciting thing about early medieval Ireland, is we really have the opportunity to be able to see these sequences of production, of use, of living through the material evidence. And it's a great opportunity that you really don't find in many other places.